Thanks, Graham, for your introduction. It's good to be here. It's a real privilege to be able to speak on behalf of the Catholic community at this meeting of people of various faiths. And it's been really enlightening to hear what's been shared so far. An obvious starting point for someone who's seeking to be a disciple of Jesus, which in John's Gospel is framed in terms of friendship. I call you friends. An obvious point would be the Eucharist. But I want to focus on Jesus' statement in John's Gospel. I am the bread of life. Now, there's clear allusions to the Eucharist, but I sense there's something more going on here. If bread is that stable food to sustain and nourish us, what is it about the person of Jesus that seeks to sustain and to nourish us? Or put it another way, what is it that sustains us, nourishes us in the fullness and every aspect of our humanity can be seen to be sacramental? That these things that help us grow and develop are actually outward signs of inward grace. So I want to share different aspects of what I think has sustained and nourishes and supports me, and seeing them as being sacramental of the sacrament, which is Christ, and the one who leads us to the Father. The Christian belief in the incarnation, that the Word has become flesh and he makes his home among us, or as the literal translation of John 1:14, he says he pitches his tent among us. I just love that image, God coming and making his home among us. It means that we cannot fall for a false dualism of body and soul, which makes the bodily, the physical and the material as being secondary. Bodies do matter. Therefore, that is why Jesus identifies himself in Matthew 25 with the hungry, the poor, the naked, the sick. So basic physical needs matter and must be acknowledged. Yes, Jesus did say that man does not live by bread alone, but we need bread, or the basic foods to keep us going. So for me, the first aspect of talking about the bread of life is that we actually do need physical food and other basic human needs, such as clothing, a place to live that is warm and secure. Our innate dignity as children of God is compromised if such needs are ignored. But in meeting those basic needs, it's not enough. Other aspects of what it means to be human need to be met. There's a famous banner of women striking mill workers in Massachusetts around 1910. And the banners proclaimed, "We need bread and roses. Our hearts yearn for wonder, beauty and awe." That is why God's creation is important, and why our sharing in that creativity is so important. We're called to be inspired, moved and transformed. This may be through nature, music, literature, fine art, or by making, baking, gardening. Although in recent years a language that is not gender-specific has been used to talk about the Trinity in terms of Creator, Redeemer and Sustainer, from a Christian's perspective, the whole of the Trinity, what traditionally known as Father, Son and Holy Spirit, are all involved are those aspects of creating, renewing and sustaining. We all have a role to share in the creativity of God. It's essential to our humanity. It not only sustains us, but it meets that need that is met in different ways to have that sense of transcendence, of awe, of being moved and transformed by beauty. Is there enough awe, wonder and beauty in your life? It's not a question I've heard in church before, but I think it's an important one if we're going to be nurtured and grow. That sense of awe, wonder, transcendence, beauty is an essential ingredient to what it means to be human and have a sense of the divine among us. But as part of our basic humanity, food and other essential needs, and even awe and wonder and beauty will not be enough. In the hunger for food, In the ache for searching for beauty, we also have hearts that long for intimacy, union, connection, relationship, love. We long for relationship, and even if we live in a society obsessed by individualism and the importance of autonomy and freedom, I sense that in stating who we are is always going to be linked to the relationships we have. It's not just the self. Who you are, who we are, who I am, is linked to the relationships I have. We are someone's sons and daughters. For many of you, you're someone's husband and wife, someone's father or mother. We're called to be relational to the divine and to the human. And of course, faced with the ecological crisis, we must be attentive and relational to the environment around. It is not something to be seen as an object and to be plundered and destroyed. Attentive and responsive to the divine, the human, and the rest of creation can be our bread of life. It sustains and transforms us. In terms of the divine, St. Augustine talks about, my heart will not rest till it rests with you. We all have restless hearts that will not ultimately be fulfilled until that deep sense of union with the divine. That is why the Eucharist is so important within the Christian tradition. The Word who became flesh becomes part of our flesh. It acknowledges there needs to be a deep union. There is that sense of communion. That's why the Eucharist is important. The Word that became flesh actually becomes part of our flesh. You can't get more united than that. But we also need each other. To this end, I want to share 3 ways in which relationships, for me, have been sacramental. As we say, something of the bread of life. As I noted already, that friendship is the model of discipleship that Jesus speaks of in John's Gospel. As you may know, as a Catholic priest, I have a commitment to celibacy. That is, a commitment not to marry. That is supposed to give space and freedom. It's not supposed to diminish my humanity. I know I'll let others judge that. But it has given me, but the space and freedom of celibacy has allowed for friendships that have challenged, inspired, has been, as John O'Donoghue describes in his book on Celtic spirituality, anam caras, soul friends, people that you meet at a profound, deep level, real intimacy of sharing and attentiveness and openness, and a bond of friendship where you grow, you develop, you flourish. I've been blessed with some really important anam caras, soul friends in my life. I would say we all need some soul friends. You might be married to them. There might be your mother, your father, your son, your daughter, or indeed a friend. But we all need anam caras, soul friends, to sustain and help us. And I've been blessed by the hospitality of so many friends. Hospitality, of course, is a spiritual practice that's important, and I would guess shared by people of other traditions as well. Luke Bretherton, the theologian, in his book on hospitality as holiness, is convinced that in a world where the focus is on secular individualism, moral consensus will never be achieved by dialogue. We're just starting at different points. But our moral values can be communicated by hospitality. An example he gives is actually the hospice movement, the palliative care movement, that although the debates are still going on about euthanasia and assisted dying, certainly in terms of how it's framed, the palliative care movement has given a different light, and that's been hospitality to the suffering, sick and dying, and that's just changed perspectives. So he would argue that it is our hospitality. If we want to live out our values, embody our values, it's our hospitality. And of course, I think that's being shown across traditions and our openness to refugees, which the government seems to have a different perspective. Again, our openness and hospitality is the way in which our values can be communicated. Finally, relationships have been really important in my work in community organising. In what we have called one-to-ones, where we share those important aspects of life, such as to whom and to what do we belong to, the key points of revelation or learning in our lives, our hopes and fears, and how we spend our time, money and energy. In this we build relational power that is willing to confront big business and big state. In the past 6 years of the existence of Tanweer Citizens, this relational power has tripled the number of living wage employees in the region, including Newcastle and Sunderland Universities and Newcastle United Football Club. It has sought to improve the mental health provision for young people, got transport agencies to have a hate charter to stop hate crime on public transport, worked with the Law Commission to make misogyny a hate crime, improved local parks and helped to ensure that 16-year-olds do not have to pay adult fares on the buses. These relationships across civic society, including charities, mosques, voluntary groups, trade unions, churches and schools, are transformative and are growing civic society. So in conclusion, my sense of Jesus as the bread of life is something that is sacramental, that's something that gives outward signs of an inward grace that inspires me to ensure that the basic needs and dignity of others are met, that we have a sense of awe, wonder and beauty that inspires us, that we're engaged with relationships that sustain us, that promotes key virtues and values and seeks to transform our society in the ways of peace and justice. And I hope altogether enabling us all to grow in faith,